Welcome back to more political chatter. In this video, we will be talking about how when you look at polling compared to now and 2024, it really does point towards a very big victory for Donald Trump. So, right now, in the five-way race between Trump, Biden, RFK Jr., Cornel West, and Jill Stein, we don't know how many ballots Cornel West will get on, as well as Robert F. Kennedy Jr., just putting that out there. But in this five-way matchup, Donald Trump leads the field by 2.7%. He beats Biden by 2.7%. Now, this might seem like a close election, but I will mind you, on this day in history, on May 16th, in 2020, Joe Biden led polls by 4.7%. So you could see here, even though 2.7 is a very close win for Donald Trump, Biden only won by a couple of states, right? He won by winning Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. A relatively close electoral vote count, but he still won with that by winning by 4.6% in the popular vote, right? He won by 4.5%. Sorry, he won by 4.5% in the popular vote. And in polls, this day in history in 2020 were quite accurate compared to the actual results in 2020. The poll said that in this day in history, Biden would win the popular vote by 4.7%. He won it by 4.5%. So, Biden eked out a win, I will say. It wasn't a horrible win, but it certainly was far away from a landslide. And he only was able to do that by winning the popular vote by this poll, basically. These accurate polls of 4.7%. Now, in 2024, Donald Trump is leading the popular vote polls by 2.7%. So, yes, it's close. And yes, things are going good for the Biden campaign. I will just bring up the money example. I mean, Biden is pulling in historic amounts of money. He raised $90 million in just the month of March. I know it's May and this is old, but March, he raised $90 million. Truly just a historic fundraising campaign that the Biden campaign is running here. And, they are running a good campaign. They are running a very good campaign. And obviously, Biden isn't out of this race. I think the election will be really, really close. But when you look at this polling data, how Donald Trump now leads by 2.7%. And in 2020, Biden led in these same polls by 4.7%. Doesn't really seem, especially when you consider how close these polls were to the actual result. There's 0.2% off. That, in 2020, the polls, were spot on, but now they're way overestimating Trump. That's just a very difficult assumption to make. And if the polls are anything like what they were in 2020, where, on this day in history, Biden led by 4.7%, then we could really see Donald Trump do very, very well when you look at this popular vote polling. So, again, Biden led by 4.7 on this day in history, but now Trump on this day, right now, leads by 2.7%. So Trump is doing 6% better than he did in 2020. So that leads us to the question, how will he do state by state? Because in 2020, there were a handful of states where Joe Biden performed worse, received, there are a handful of states where the margin was less than 6%. That's what I'm trying to say, which means, Trump is able to overperform in every state by 6%, as these polls are indicating, then we could see Donald Trump flip these states. So obviously, every safe Republican state would stay with him if we are using this logic. Montana went to him by 16. That'll only stay safe. That'll go in the 20s. Arkansas was by 27. So you get the point. So that's Utah, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, the Dakotas, Nebraska at large, Nebraska's 1st and Nebraska's 3rd district. Kansas was likely, but when Trump overperforms by 6, that does go over 15% to make it a safe state. Oklahoma, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama. And then South Carolina, when you give him 6% more, then that would be a safe state for him as well. And as well as Alaska, which he won by 10.1 in 2020, would become safe. And I believe that is it for safe states. Yeah, because, none would become safe. So, and then safe states for Biden, even with a 6-point over performance by Trump, we see states like California, New York, not many, but California, New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, and Maryland, as well as Washington, D.C., would all stay Democratic. Let me just double check on Washington. What was that margin? So 19.2. So that one would actually not be safe. So you can see here how Trump overperforming by 6 has massive impacts, even in just the first states that we characterize. We see that after you fill in the safe states, as well as Hawaii, Donald Trump has a lead of 125 electoral votes to Biden's 113. That is very, very rare. After characterizing safe states, Democrats usually have a comfortable lead after that. But now let's get into some closer states. I'm looking at a state like Texas, which he won by 5.6. When you give him 6% more, that remains in the likely characterization for Donald Trump. You've got states like Iowa and Ohio. He won by 8% in both of these states in 2020. Those will stay in the likely column. He won Maine's 2nd congressional district by 7.4. That stays likely. Maine's 1st district does stay safe Democratic. I forgot to characterize that one. But as for Donald Trump, continuing with his likely states, we come to states that were pretty close in 2020, like Florida, which voted for him by 3.4%, and North Carolina, which voted for him by 1.3%. Both of these states were critical battlegrounds in 2020, really heavily focused on by both the Trump and Biden campaigns. But this time around, if he's overperforming, if he's overperforming from 2020 by 6%, then these states would actually become likely states, and that would be really something to watch, because that's not something we typically see with these traditionally close states like North Carolina and Florida, and it is really in the realm of possibility when you look at the polling numbers from this election. Now moving on to Biden states. I mean, you've got states that were somewhat close in 2020, like Colorado, which voted for him by 13.5, and New Mexico, which voted for Biden by 10.8. As for Colorado, that does stay a likely Democratic state, as well as states that voted for him by a safe margin in 2020. That's Oregon, Washington, Delaware, and New Jersey. These are reduced to likely states, which is really not a good sign at all when states that are supposed to go for you by safe margins that you shouldn't even have to worry about are now falling into that likely margin characterization. That is never a good sign for a campaign. Illinois as well. That goes for all of the states that I just characterized. Let me check up on Maine at large. So yeah, he won that by 9%. So then you come to the really core close states. States like Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. Really true battleground states. And Donald Trump currently has 235 electoral votes, and Biden has 191. So Biden definitely has some catch-up work to do. But when you look at some of these states, like states that voted for Biden by 10%, like Virginia, or 7.4%, like New Hampshire, or 10.8%, like New Mexico, these are states that really Biden didn't have to worry about really at all in 2020. These are very healthy margins. But if Donald Trump is overperforming by 6%, you see that his win in Virginia would be reduced to just 4 percentage points, which I believe is it's less than Hillary Clinton's margin in 2016. When you look at New Mexico, the margin would be reduced to 5%. And in New Hampshire, it would be reduced to a margin of just 1.4%, making it a very critical battleground state. So New Hampshire, as well as Virginia and New Mexico are now critical battlegrounds, and they only vote for Joe Biden by a lean margin. That also goes for Maine at large, where Biden won by 9.1%. And Minnesota, which went to him by 7.1, is reduced to just a 1.1% margin in 2024. That's less than Hillary Clinton's margin in 2016, who is a famously weak electoral candidate. So now we come to the 6 plus Nebraska second, but the 6 core swing states: Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. The 6 states that are most focused on in presidential elections. And again, this is in the case that Donald Trump overperforms by 6%. All of these states, plus Nebraska second, were Biden states, plus the district, plus Nebraska second. All of these voted for Joe Biden in 2020. Now, when you look at the margins, they were critical battlegrounds, meaning they were all less than 6% margins. He won Wisconsin by less than a point, as well as Georgia and Arizona. He won Nevada by 2.4, Michigan by 2.8, and Pennsylvania by 1.2. So if Donald Trump is able to overperform his margins from 2020 by 6% in all of these states, as well as the nation as a whole, he will flip every one of these states. Wisconsin voted for Biden by 0.6. See that if Trump is able to overperform by 6, he wins it by 5.4%. Making Wisconsin a likely margin win for Donald Trump. That would be a huge shock, but it would put him over a 5% margin. That is not something we have seen in quite a while, decades to be exact. Looking at Michigan, this, if Trump is able to overperform by 6%, he would win it by just over 3%, making it a lean win for him. Pennsylvania, 1.2%. This would be just under a likely margin win. This would be a 4.8% margin for Trump, but regardless, it goes to him. This one by a lean margin. Georgia, you see, voted for Biden by such a narrow margin, 0.2%, when Trump overperforms by 6, as the polls are indicating. Then he would win it by a likely margin, a shocking likely margin. Then you've got Arizona, which voted for Biden by just 0.3%. This would also be a likely Trump state. He would win it by 5.7 in this hypothetical. Then you've got Nevada. This would vote for him. This would vote for Trump by just over 3% to make it a lean margin win. Then you come to Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, which voted for Biden by 6.6%. And Biden does win this one by 0.6% because, of course, it gets 6% closer. So at least he does hang on to Nebraska second by less than 1%, making it a tilt margin win. So look at that. Donald Trump wins by a very large margin, 312 electoral votes to 226. That's a bigger margin than Biden's 2020 victory and even his 2016 electoral victory. So this is definitely something to watch, to see how Biden led in these same exact polls by 6% more. He was doing 6% better on this day in history in 2020 than he is now. And, when it's the same polls and, when it's just the same, type of information that we're getting when it comes to polling, this is really what tells us, the contrast between 2020 and now. You can say what you want about polls, as a whole, whether or not they're accurate, but, the contrast between 2020 and 2024, that is always something to keep your eye on, because that contrast, that difference, might tell us more about the election than the actual polls themselves. So thank you all for watching this video. I really hope you all enjoyed. Subscribe if you did, leave a comment, drop a like, and I will see you all later.